can't find nothing on the radio.
You ready, Steve?
Welcome to Songology. He's Bruce.
He's Richard.
And this is another episode from our Song of the Day archives.
Enjoy.
Welcome back, Bruce. It's the start of a new week. What do we have on tap for this week?
This week, we will have our first, and maybe our only, depending on how this one goes, virtual field trip.
Virtual field trip. Where are we going?
You're headed to the deep south.
Oh, okay.
The deep, deep south of the old US of A.
Uh-huh.
Now, by way of introduction, there's a piece of music that you are familiar with. You get to play Name That Tune. This is an easy one.
Okay.
Fire away.
Fire away. I know it from the first chords. Do I know the name? Alabama.
Yes! And that's where you're off to.
Okay.
Sweet Home Alabama.
Sweet Home Alabama.
Now,
I know there's more to the title, but...
Well, hey, you got the Alabama part.
Well, hey.
So toward the end of that song, there is another part that is more important for our purposes on our little field trip.
Okay.
So let's hit that.
Now Muscle Shoals has got the swampers, and they've been known to pick a song or two.
Okay.
So now, did you get that?
Um...
You know what the lyrics are. The line is, now Muscle Shoals has got the swampers.
Yes.
And they've been known to pick a song or two. Now, that was always a bit of a mystery for me. I always sort of wondered, well, who exactly are you talking about? I knew, though, being a fan of Bob Seger, that occasionally on Bob Seger albums, I would see the name Muscle Shoals Rhythm Section in the liner notes.
Okay.
And so I knew there was something at Muscle Shoals, didn't really know what. I had occasion to run across on the documentary channel, which was a channel I didn't even know I had. One of those moments, 57 channels and nothing on. And so I'm zipping around the TV, as most guys do, and I see it says Muscle Shoals. And so I thought, I'll zip over there. What is that exactly? And I happened to come upon an absolutely fascinating little documentary that I would highly recommend to anybody that tells the story of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and music. And a fascinating story it is. Now, on our little virtual field trip, I want to give you some highlights of that. In the movie, they do it much better than I ever can. But to give you some idea of just what came out of Muscle Shoals, because it was an amazing place. The quantity of music and quality of music, practically everybody passed through Muscle Shoals.
So is it a studio or is it a community or?
Well, it's... to sort of give you an idea, it's in the northwest corner of Alabama on the Tennessee River.
Yeah.
It is not far. Really, it would be within maybe 100 miles or less of Memphis in Tennessee. And it's actually 4 communities all sandwiched together. When I found out about exactly the arrangement, I was very much reminded of Victoria, where there are actually 4 cities all crammed together in that little space.
Yep.
There's 4 cities, small cities, that make up the area that they just refer to as the Shoals. There's Muscle Shoals itself, which is a city, but there's about 13,000 people there now.
Mm-hmm.
There is Tuscumbia, which is about 8,000 or 9,000. There is Sheffield, which is about 6,000. And then across the Tennessee River to the Florence, which is the largest of them. Florence is between 35,000 and 40,000 people today.
Right.
In the period of time that we're talking about, in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, they were smaller. Small kind of Alabama country towns almost. And a number of people basically say that all these communities are jammed together and you have to really be a local to know which one you're in at any one time, because you can be standing with one foot in one city and your other foot in the other kind of thing.
Yep.
Now, there are actual shoals that make the Tennessee River unnavigable right there. And the name itself may come from mussels, the seafood.
Yep.
Nobody's really sure exactly where it came from. Other people argue that the Tennessee River there makes a bend like an arm, and so this is the muscles in the arm or something like that. Okay. Nobody really knows how it was named anymore. Many famous people, though, came from that area. In fact, Helen Keller, remember Helen Keller, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not personally, obviously, but,
Yeah.
she came from Tuscumbia.
Okay.
And the yard where she learned what water was through the sign language and so forth
Yeah.
is still there today. There's a little museum there. You can go and see it. Also, W.C. Handy, who was the father of the blues.
Okay.
There's a statue of W.C. Handy in Memphis. He was born right in that area. And I believe he comes from Florence. And Sam Phillips also comes from that area. Sam Phillips might be from Sheffield. He's from one of the four. Sam Phillips founded Sun Records in Memphis and was the guy who discovered Elvis Presley. But the guy that we sort of start out with, and the guy who really got things rolling in Muscle Shoals, was a guy by the name of Rick Hall. And Rick Hall was an Alabama boy, dirt poor when he grew up, absolutely dirt poor. And had a lot of tragedy to deal with in his life. He had a younger brother who died in tragic circumstances that split up his family. His father worked like a dog to keep him and his brothers and sisters, basically just fed and clothed. And then later, as an adult, he had to deal with the fact that his father passed away, and within 2 weeks, his wife was killed in a car accident. So, he had his share of tragedy, and perhaps not surprisingly, was a country musician for a while.
Uh-huh.
But he had always been involved in music from a very early age. When you're poor, what have you got? But singing around the place and so forth. And so, having played music for quite a while, having written music for quite a while, he was working, believe it or not, he was working in the Reynolds Aluminum tinfoil factory. Decided that was not really for him.
Yeah.
And with two other fellows, a saxophone player that he'd met and been friends with and writing partners with, and another fellow that by the name of Tom Stafford, they set up a recording studio. Tom Stafford's family owned a drugstore in Florence, Alabama, and they set up a recording studio above the drugstore. And so was born Florence, Alabama Music Enterprises, or what became the acronym spelled out FAME, right? So this was FAME, the beginning of FAME Studios. Now, they were working away very diligently, but one of the things that comes very clear when you learn anything about Rick Hall is he is a very precise, but to the point of being authoritarian, even dictatorial at times, sort of a guy. He knows what he wants, and he isn't going to stop until he gets what he wants in terms of the music, in terms of the business, in terms of, all of those things. And the other two partners fairly quickly, actually, maybe the best description that I've ever run into of Rick Hall was somebody once called him the General Patton of American music. Which is true in the sense that very successful, but not the easiest guy to work with. The two partners that he had sort of got tired of Rick, and so one day when Rick arrived at the recording studio, these other two said, well, we've taken a vote and you're out. He was able, though, to keep the name and some publishing rights, and they kept the equipment, which they thought they would be successful with. Now, this was the sort of thing that when Rick Hall suffers a setback in life, it seems it just makes him more determined to succeed. And so he took off just outside of town where there was a sort of an abandoned tobacco warehouse that he could rent and fix up. He set up his own recording studio there on money and was trying to get various acts to come to him and record. So it didn't really go very well in the early stages until one day Rick Hall was attending a meeting at a local hotel. It was a service club meeting. I can't remember if it was a Lions Club or the Rotary, something like that. But a service club meeting at the local hotel. And he was approached by a fellow who worked at the hotel as a bellhop by the name of Arthur Alexander. So Arthur comes up to Rick and says, I understand that you're a music producer. And Rick confirms that that's the case. And Arthur says, well, I sing and I've written a song and I think it might be worth recording. So fine. Well, sing me your song, Arthur. So Arthur sings out the song and says, what do you think? And Hall replies, I think it's a hit. And so Arthur then says, well, do you think we can record it? And Rick Hall then says, come by and we'll record it tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
He was quite keen.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Now, Arthur Alexander is an answer. You can now mess with people if you want. I'll give you this as a trivia question because Arthur Alexander is the answer to the trivia question, whose music has been covered by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan? They all covered Arthur Alexander.
Uh-huh.
Now, Arthur himself, he was a boy from Florence, and he approached Rick Hall, got the song recorded, the song that we're going to hear, which is the song that really kicked things off in the Muscle Shoals area, is a song that Arthur had written called You Better Move On. And it was a song, actually, it's basically him singing to somebody who has his eye on Arthur's girl, and he's saying to this guy, just stay away from a girlfriend kind of thing. Arthur Alexander says that the song was written based on a personal experience that he'd had, and everybody involved in the recording knew who he was talking about. So, so this was he was the first black artist to record at Fame Studios, and as was the case, and what you'll discover as we go through this, is really quite interesting because most of the musicians who play on all these classic R&B tracks, soul tracks, and so forth, all through the 60s and 70s, are a bunch of white guys from Alabama, which I found to be really quite surprising. And, as we will also discover, all sorts of professional musicians discovered. They were really quite surprised as well.
Uh-huh.
So it all began with Arthur Alexander and You Better Move On.
And as usual, I have to stop it right there due to the wonderful world of fair use rules. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe. You can visit us on Facebook or head over to our website, songology.ca. Now, here's your chance to listen to the music or go on to the next episode.